With that, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, my friend and colleague, Junior Delgado. Junior is the president-elect of the Eastern Association of Colleges and Employers, and Junior is also the Career Center Director at Westfield State University. He has over 20 years experience in higher education with additional experience in both admissions and recruitment. As I said, he is the president-elect of the Eastern Association of Colleges and Employers and an inaugural fellow for the Career Leadership Collective. He has led as the executive chair and president to the Massachusetts Educational Recruiting Consortium, and he's an adjunct instructor for the departments of English and Psychology. He's also completed this Institute for Management and Leadership at Harvard. So I will let Junior take over at this point, but again, thank you so much, Junior, for joining us today. I value our friendship and collaboration in the Northeast Career Center Directors Forum that you lead so eloquently. Again, thanks for being here with us today. Junior?
Thank you, Jim. All the same feelings, value our friendship and the time that we spend together. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here this morning and allowing me into your space. I am very excited to be here. As I shared with the team yesterday when we had a conversation about the topic at hand, you could spend multiple hours of research. There is data, there is information, there are national articles around career and the intersectionality of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so today I just want to spend about 15 minutes talking a little bit about my trajectory, where I've come, where I hope to be, and just sharing some points for considerations around intersectionality, diversity, equity, and inclusion. My work has always centered around students, so serving the student community. But again, I'm very excited to be here. I do want to thank Jim, Ami, Nancy, Beth, Christina, Wiley, and Evan for the warm welcome and talking me through the presentation yesterday. So it's been a pleasure to work with all of you. To the point where I would say this, that I've been in this space so long that I remember when Ami was a student at her prior institution. So I've been around quite a while. The other thing that I would say, and I'll go back one further, when I first met Ami, she thought that I was actually a student and not an advisor to our Latino Association at our institution. So again, it is a pleasure to be here with you. I want to commend all the winners today. So congratulations on being recognized. I also want to thank each and every one of you for being here with us this morning in this space. I did chuckle when Jim said that you had 498 career champions. As I think about our own campus, and we probably have maybe 30 at best, and trying to grow that very quickly. So yes, UConn is a leader in that space and arena. So commendations to everybody at the University of Connecticut for your work that you are doing. So again, my pronouns are he, him, his, and I'd like to jump into a statement here that I think really will frame the conversation for us all today. And so 30 years since Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality to describe how discrimination against different facets of a person's identity can overlap and impact their lives. The color of your skin, your gender, disability, and sexual orientation all interact to affect your lived experience and contribute to unequal outcomes in ways that cannot be attributed to one dimension alone. So we're going to use that to frame that conversation. And a couple of things very quickly, and I will talk a little bit more about who I am and my background. This is the OWL, Westfield State University. We are the Owls. Whenever I am out and about, every Instagram photo, whatever you see that I'm in, I think my sibling asked me, do you own anything else other than Westfield State gear? Because that's all I ever wear in every single picture, even when I'm out with the family. But this is our owl. My favorite color is blue, hence the blue owl, the blue sports coat, blue in my tie. So blue is something that I really like. And those are our school colors as well. So it works perfectly. But what I want to start off with is by talking about a story of a young professional where 2 years into working in higher education, came across a vice president for a conversation. And as this vice president was leaving the institution here at Westfield State, this young professional had a conversation. And my real name is Junior. I am not named after anybody else. And what I tell people is it's just an interesting story, but it's very strange. My mother and father were young parents when they birthed me. And At that time, from what I was told, there was a little bit of a tiff or a disagreement. And my mom said, I will not name you after your father. And there was a soap opera star in our country at that time with the name Junior. She thought it was a real name, so she gave me that name. So I'm not named after my dad, but so it is Junior. And so this conversation with this vice president, before the individual was set to leave the institution to go somewhere else, in a one-on-one meeting, said to the individual, I believe that you really should, and I'm going to recommend that you change your name, because when people see your name on a resume, they're going to think all sorts of things about you. They're going to believe that it is ethnic. And so I highly, highly recommend that you change your name. The other thing that this individual did say to this person on many, many occasions was, every time you come to a meeting, shave. I need you to shave your beard. I need you to shave your mustache. And as an individual from a culture where, for Latinx men, many, 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 many years ago, I'm going back decades, mustaches and beards have been one of those things that are part of the culture. And to be told by a vice president that you need to shave can be very, very alarming, can be very striking. And the whole conversation about a name change for a young professional can be something that would drive someone out of a profession. And what I put here were a couple of things that I think are important: role modeling, care, welcoming, respect, kindness, words, and tone. And what I mean by that is that each and every one of us has a great impact, whether that's on our students, whether that's on our employees, or anyone that we interact with. Students will look to us. Students will watch us. Students will see how we behave when we go to meetings, how we interact with other students. You can ask a student, 9 out of 10 times, they're going to be very honest, and they're going to tell you, oh, that person pretends to like students, but they really don't care about students. And so again, being that role model, providing the care, being welcoming, respecting our students and employees. I will give this to George Mason University. I shared this with the team yesterday. They run a kindness campaign on their campus, and it's all about being kind to one another. It's all about being civil to one another. And so, and again, when you're having conversations, the words that you use and the tone and the way that you deliver those are very important. That can have a great impact on students. That can have a great impact on employees as well. Just to tell you a little bit more about who I am, just so you get an idea, I'm a husband, a father, a son, and a brother. And I started doing this in every single presentation because I started to have students that said to other students, I don't know if he's actually human. We always see him running around campus in a tie. He always sounds like a robot when he's talking and presenting about his topics, but is he even a human being? And so all of my presentations are now started with what I call my authentic self, because I want students to understand that I don't just come to campus or I'm here 24/7 in my office, that I actually have a life outside of work. And so I'm a husband, a father, a son, and a brother. One thing that I can say for anyone who has kids and can identify with this, I have an 8-year-old, and I now know that I have no energy that will ever match an 8-year-old as much as I try. It's never going to happen. I try to keep up, but even I'm losing in races in the backyard now because I can't beat my daughter. The other thing that I will say is that Spanish is my first language. So I'm a bilingual. I am from Carolina, Puerto Rico. And so when you fly into Puerto Rico, they tell everybody on every airplane ticket that you're flying into San Juan. You are not flying into San Juan. If you didn't know this, you're actually flying into Carolina. I'm a first-generation college graduate at every level, from middle school to high school, through my junior college, all the way through to my master's degree. The one thing that I will say in every presentation is I do not claim to be the smartest family member, because I know that I have cousins and nephews that are probably way smarter, at least book-wise. So I'll say that. I am a tailgater. I love being out cooking and doing those kinds of things at football games. I hope this doesn't offend anybody from the University of Connecticut. I am a lifelong Notre Dame football fan. So I bleed Irish, not Irish, but I bleed Irish blood. And people always ask me, Junior, how in the world, you're originally from Puerto Rico, you came to Massachusetts, how did you like Notre Dame football? And it's a very, very simple story. When you are poor and you come to this country for the first time and you can't afford cable TV, and now this was in the 80s, there were two teams on TV. On ABC was the University of Michigan, and on NBC was Notre Dame football. And so that was something that I truly, truly enjoyed watching every Saturday, and grew up through the miserable years to the good years. So again, Notre Dame football fan. I'm a movie binge watcher. I really will watch anything. I enjoy movies. My favorite genre of music is Spanish. I will listen to all Spanish music. I don't even turn on the English stations in the car. It's just who I am. And it's one genre all the time. So I always sound like a broken record. Everybody's like, you listen to the same thing all the time. Yes, I do. And then what I have found, two things that are a place of Zen, are mountain and road biking. I enjoy getting on trails. I enjoy going for long, long rides. And as well as I'll throw into that hiking, because I think that on a stressful day that does relax me, as well as one of the things that I did not share with the group, I actually enjoy gardening and getting my hands into the soil and the dirt and being one with the earth. I think that that is also important. The other thing that I should say, and the last thing I'll say authentically about myself, is that I have way too many cousins to count, from first cousins all the way through third cousins. On my paternal grandmother's side, there was 15 children. And on my maternal grandmother's side, there were 17 children. So just a big family, somewhat. So again, lots of cousins that live all over the world. But that is a little bit about me. The three things that I want to cover today, and when we talk about looking at the intersectionality of careers, I want to cover it from three sections, or three overviews, which are active listening, structure, and implementation. But what I will say, which really resonates with me, my culture or my cultural background is really about helping and giving back. And when I think about everyone in my family, what I have found is, and this is true to date, my entirety of family are either in education, are nurses, are correctional officers, are police officers, are electricians, are plumbers. And quick fact here, regardless if you have family members that are plumbers, electricians, they're still never going to come to your house because they're way too busy. So it's not going to happen because I don't ever see that benefit. And I have not yet to this day seen that benefit from two of my cousins who are plumbers and electricians. But I think that that is one of those things that I would say, the culture which has led me into the field of working with students, which is something that I get up every day excited to do, has come from what I call the story of newspapers to careers. And what I mean by newspapers to careers, when I was growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, everything from jobs to internships to everything you found could be located through your good old-fashioned newspaper. And at that time, you would go to these newspapers and there would be 20, 25, 30 pages of jobs and opportunities. And while going through high school, it seemed, and not seemed, but it was accurate, that every single year, my father, who I was fortunate to live with, was laid off because he worked in the manufacturing industry. And at 13, 14, 15 years old, is the individual who was the translator for the family. I would get up at 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, and sometimes walk a mile to 2 miles to the local convenience store so that I could buy the paper to come back and sit down at our kitchen table and start highlighting jobs and opportunities for my father. And little did I know that years later, that would bring me into the line of work that I'm doing. So there is that connection that came from school. Now we've come so far because the newspaper now is only about 10 pages. There are maybe a half a page of jobs and everything else is online resources. So again, that is my connection to this field. That is why I do the work that I do. So active listening, structure, and implementation, and I want to go into those a little bit. The other thing that I would like to commend the University of Connecticut on is, and I thank Wiley for sharing this, the life transformative education. Your platform is amazing. The work that you're doing from the first phase of having 150 life transformative educators work across your entire university with one goal in mind. I can't commend you enough because I think you are setting the trend for other institutions. looking at inspiring and empowering life transformative educators at all levels to embrace the opportunities and lead from a grassroots efforts to impact your students at every single level. And I specifically really liked reading about your core of the culture, the two areas with faculty and staff, that it's developing authentic and supportive relationships with students. Our students are very smart. Our students are very bright, and they know when you're being genuine and when you're being authentic and when you're not. And then the second part of that cultural goal, the extending the opportunities for all graduate, undergraduate students to participate in learning experiences that develop agency and purpose. Everything that we will do for our students moving forward will have a purpose with goals in mind. So again, my commendations to everyone at the University of Connecticut. It is an excellent website. It was a lot of good information, and I enjoyed the way that it was broken down. So let's start with active listening, because I want to go through, and I only have, I think, probably maybe about 8 or 9 minutes left. With active listening, and I want to focus this on students from a college and university perspective, at each level of the university, from our maintenance individuals to our groundskeepers, our administrative assistants, counselors, coaches, deans, all the way up to the highest levels. Active listening from what our students are saying is so important. And I always ask people that I talk to, how much listening are you doing on your campus? There was some study that said, it's very interesting, that a lot of times when people are speaking to you, you are not actively listening because your mind is in 20 other places with all the things that you have to do, the papers you have to correct, the meetings you have to attend. And so we lose out on active listening. And students will speak to everybody at every level on your campus. So actively listening. And students will connect to the people a lot of times that actually look like them. On our campus, that happens to be our maintainers. That happens to be some of our groundskeepers. So students do have conversations with them about what they like, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, and what they're feeling. The other thing that I share within active listening, and this is where it really requires a lot of active listening, is understanding that not all groups are the same. Each student is an individual with different lived experiences, culture, familial backgrounds, etc. Not one Dominican student is the same as the other. They are both very different. Not one Puerto Rican student is the same as the other, very different. Not one Asian American student is the same as the other, very, very different. And actively listening to those individuals and what they're saying is very important. The other one is to understand when students experience racism, micro and macro aggressions on our campuses or in our place of work. Also, understanding through listening if you need to assist, intervene, or provide help to that student connecting to the right resources. That is very, very important through active listening. The other one that I'd like to touch upon is career champions. And again, I mentioned this life transformative education. It really is creating an intentional movement on your campus to impact students and all students, which is so important. The one thing that I share with all the individuals that I speak to about career champion programs, and I really cherish this when colleagues across the country say this, that it is not the sole responsibility of the Career Center on any college campus to fully be responsible for the full engagement of students, because these conversations about career, jobs, industry, research are taking place across all levels of campus. So being able to, again, actively listen from a career champion's perspective, understand what your students need when having career-related discussions. And the other one is identifying student peers that will impact other students. It always goes with the saying, when one student has a great experience with your office, your service, they're going to share that with other students, which in turn will bring you more students. That will never go away. I think that might be like sales 101, if I'm not mistaken from the research. And then student expectations. Students want to be heard and not waste their time. Students want to see additional resources provided or added. Students want to be included and not feel left out. Every single student wants to be included and not feel left out, and that's important. Students want the campus to feel like a place of comfort, belonging, inclusive, and that is also important. And another student expectation is, again, they want to have real conversations about their needs and what they're experiencing, and active listening for all of our students from a cultural perspective, from a person of color's perspective, from students with disabilities to our veteran students. Very, very important, because I don't want to leave out any population. Here's something that I always show, because people always wonder this, did this guy ever actually have hair? And the stress of working in higher education, this is what it does over a 20-year period. You start off early in your career with a nice head of hair, and 20 years later, it's all gone. That's the stress of meetings. That's the stress of interacting, attending late night programs. So again, I just throw this in there as a funny slide, but 20 years will do this to you. The next part of what I'd like to talk about is the structure. So the structure within that intersectionality and assessment. I believe that the University of Connecticut is starting to have these conversations. You're trying to understand where your campus culture is. You're trying to understand how your students are doing within your institution, what they are experiencing with individual offices and services. If you really want to try and experiment and see what students are thinking, ask them about their experiences with different offices on your campus and listen to the reactions of what they're saying, because I'm going to guarantee you it's very different across the board for most offices or services that they interact with. The other one is, what your life transformative education is doing is, where do you want your institution to be? So 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now, what is that vision? What is it going to look like? The other one, which is something that we experienced in 2017 and continues to happen across the country, you have to assess when there are incidents that happen on your campus from a racism perspective, from a perspective of where students do not feel inclusive, and how are those incidents handled? Do you have a structure in place to be able to immediately mitigate or bring those students in for those conversations? Because it can make students feel very uneasy to the point where students will leave your institution. I always talk about practical and financial as two things as part of the structure almost being one. And from a practical perspective, when you put out the whole website for the life transformative education, what is realistic for the University of Connecticut? Will the structure that you are setting up or set up meet the needs of your students? And here's the one that I think I have the most conversation with people about. A lot of times organizations, institutions will put a lot of words and statements and diversity statements up on websites. And are those real? Are those used to meet a benchmark? Or is that something that your institution is going to live? And that's important, because anybody can put words out, put statements, put paragraphs, but if you're not living what you're putting down, the first group of individuals that will know that will either be your students or your employees. So that is important. And then, can your structure in the way that you're setting it up or will set it up, can that meet the goals that you're trying to achieve, which is another question. And like I said, the practical goes into the financial, which are the initiatives or work that is being done or will be done, is that feasible to your institution? Can the services or resources be feasible? And I think that what was mentioned was that scalability is important, because 20 people can't meet with 34,000 students. Just will never, ever happen. That is humanly impossible. And then the one thing that we all know at every single institution, at every single company or organization, is that there are no endless finances. The money is only to a certain point. The money is only a certain amount. So there are not endless finances. And the other thing that I talk about as part of structure is setting up how many collaborations. So how many entities are being engaged? Who are you engaging with? Are the groupings, the collaborations inclusive for all students? Because students want inclusivity, equity. They want to feel welcome. They want to feel involved. Do the pairings of the collaborations work seamlessly, or does it require greater collaboration? Does it require greater commitment or greater finances? And then within your structure, are your students or student groups involved as part of the structure? I think so many times campuses forget about the student voice. And from what I'm learning from UConn and what Jim has shared before, it seems like your students have a lot of say, or they're a part of your process, which is really good. You need that student voice to always find out what is happening on what I call the ground level. So the last phase is the implement. And the implement is just actionable items from a campus for an organizational perspective, your campus or department vision. Does that align with what your university is sharing? Does that align with your life transformative education? Have departments or organizations looked at the website to overhaul to be inclusive? Are you leaving out any one group? Are your materials for anybody or a student that has a hearing impairment? Do you have resources that are serving those students? If you have a student that is visually impaired, are you also offering something that is inclusive for those students? So looking at your website to see where it can be overhauled to be inclusive. Are there programs that are just to one affinity group, or do you have programs for all affinity groups? The hiring of diverse faculty and staff. I think we talk about this all the time. It isn't that every conversation is going to happen with every faculty and person of color, because there are never going to be enough. So this is where allies, champions, and partners come into play. What types of cultural enrichment programs are being offered, from diverse speakers to smaller workshops to one-on-one workshops, including the monthly celebrations. And so one of the things that I think is this is something that most places have to do better, organizations, businesses, the monthly celebrations, because sometimes what I've seen is organizations will focus on 3 particular groups and exclude everyone else. Or they'll go out for 3 different groups and do big celebrations, and then some of your other groups get one little thing, which is not being inclusivity. The thing that I would say from the goals of the implementation, and I know that I've borrowed this from somewhere, but it's very, very timely: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And what I say with timely is when you're having conversations with students, if you see that there is a great need on your campus for X, you can't wait a year or 2 years or 3 years to do it. If students are saying, we need this, how do we do this now? So it also has to be timely. And then the last piece that I will share is from an everyday engagement perspective. And this is coaches, this is individuals that are teaching, these are individuals that work in offices, advising, meeting with students every day. And I call it the everyday engagement. And so meeting students where they are, so important. Building time into your schedule to interact with students' activities and what's important to them is absolutely paramount. They enjoy it seeing you when you're at a baseball game, when you're at a play, when you're at their research presentation. They enjoy seeing you because it removes you from the context of being in your office, and they start to see you more as a human being. Actively listen and recommend or connect those students to other individuals for support. Teach or talk with students to love themselves or see themselves positively. And now more than ever during COVID, that is something we have to do for our students. Allow students to talk about their lives to learn more. Just as much as they want to learn about us, we want to learn about our students. The other one, which I think is very interesting, which is honoring students' language. Not everyone speaks the same. Honoring students' language and being able to listen to what they have to say. Do not immediately correct students, but honor their language. The other one that I would say is that the work is not done alone, and welcome conversations from members of their support system, that student's coach, their faculty member, the supervisor from another department. The work is not being done alone. And the last piece that I'll say is connecting students with role models or individuals that may share the same interests. So that if you know the student is heavily into music, connecting that student with somebody in your music department or a club that is about music. And so to wrap all of this up and to surmise everything, the thing that I would say is that I am not an expert in this field, and I don't proclaim to be. I am actively learning. I am actively growing. I am actively researching. But the one thing that I'll leave you with today, and I'll share some of my social platforms if you want to engage. And again, you'll probably see all Westfield State stuff because that's what I do. But I would say that actively listening and being open to learn. The populations on our college campuses will continue to change and look very, very different from the next 1 to 20 years. And if we are not ready to serve our students, listen to our students, participate with our students, and I'm going to even throw that into employees as well, because the future workforce is also going to look very different, and actively engaging and making people feel inclusive from every perspective: race, gender, ethnic, religious group. Making people feel inclusive makes for a much better institution and makes for a much better working environment. So thank you so much for your time. Again, I commend the University of Connecticut on all the work that you're doing, and a great, great big congratulations to all of the winners today that are being recognized.
Thank you so much, Junior, for bringing your authentic self and sharing your authentic self with us, as well as your words of encouragement and inspiration. It was very much appreciated. And I would like to ask everyone to join me in giving Junior a virtual round of applause. So thank you so much. So we'd like to move into our question and answer period. And we do have a few questions from the audience. So I'm going to start with one that somebody put in the chat around: how can we scale programs for all affinity groups while ensuring all are effective and specific to each population without generalizing their experience?
Can you give me that one again, Nancy? That was a mouthful.
Yeah, of course. How can we scale programs for all affinity groups while ensuring all programs are effective and specific to each population without generalizing their experiences?
Awesome. So I'm going to say that what I have seen, for example, and I've read what I have seen, and I just read recently, which was very interesting. It was a commentary from a couple of colleagues across the higher education landscape. And they talked about that students have never, ever seen their offices because they are out and about meeting with students where students are and building programs and relationships where students are, wherever they might interact, whether it's in your athletic center, et cetera, et cetera. That is where you would want to meet students. But to go further, actively having conversations with the different students that are coming to you, I think it's important. Some celebrations, again, one thing that I will say is you're not going to be able to do everything. That's the first thing that I'm going to say to everyone. You're not going to be able to do everything because the budget that would be required to do everything is probably a significant amount. But I think that having the active conversation, some campuses will do climate surveys of students to see what it is that they need. And from that point, it's not to overgeneralize student needs, but there has to be some sort of grouping within those student groups to say, or within those students and those certain populations to say, okay, what is it that you really need? Is it, and I'll just use the career space as an example. Is it right now that you're lacking more experience in mock interviewing? So how can we bring all of you together and have this conversation around mock interviewing? Because I think if you try to separate it out, you're going to end up with what was talked about earlier. You'd be doing 34,000 individual meetings, and that's not, one, not humanly possible, two, not feasibly possible. So I hope that, and again, I don't have the right answers for all of that. But I think that through the active conversation and the active listening, you're going to learn what it is that you can put together for students that might bring it more in line for each one of those groups. Because you could have, let's say and I'll use today, for example, on our campus, we're having a rainbow graduation for our LGBTQIA community. And you might have members of that community that are thinking about the exact same thing that our Black Student Union is thinking about around whatever the issue might be, and bringing them together to have these conversations so that we're not excluding all the other groups. Anybody can attend, but these just happen to be the two groups that brought the issue to us. So we're creating this forum, a space for them to have the conversation, which is important.
So I think you sort of answered this question, Junior, around, that anyone can come, but these are the specific, concerns that this specific population has. But let's say that some programs are for female students in a specific department and another is for Latino students. How do we include others who, might be interested in that topic and might think that that program isn't for them because they don't fall into one of those groups?
Well, one of the things that I would say again, one, I'm going to always continue to go back to active listening, but I'll actually give you an example because this happened on our campus. So it's a great question. And so actively listening to what the students want, what the students do need is important, but it's also sharing to the entire campus to be inclusive of all that you're offering. So for example, one of the things that was asked on our campus, and this was probably just when we had just gotten back from COVID, we kept hearing that students that identified as male did not know how to tie a tie. And so we promoted this, we actively went out and we shared it with everyone, anyone from across the university. We went to our different groups on campus. We went to our TRIO program. We went to our urban education program, the Black Student Union, our Latino Association, our veteran students. Lo and behold, completely not what I expected, because when I arrived to this presentation, there was 10 individuals that identified as female who showed up for this workshop. And so I had to stop for a second. I'm thinking, okay, why are you here? That's very interesting. And so I started asking each person, why did you come to the workshop today? Oh, because I have a sibling who doesn't know how to tie a tie and I want to learn how to. I have a partner who doesn't know how to tie a tie. I didn't get one person who identified as male to show up at the workshop, but we opened it up to our entire campus and we specifically invited every group to attend. So I think it's being open to inviting individuals. And then if the program, let's say, is for female students, but one department and then Latinx students want to show up as well, listening to what it is they hope to get out of whatever that specific presentation might be.
Okay, that definitely makes a lot of sense. I see that somebody has their hand raised, I believe,
Yes.
Jane.
Yes.
Yes, so hello, thank you
Hello.
so much for your presentation. Actually, I'm asking because I'm involved in some, creating diverse, inclusive environment in our department. We got some grant from CLAS, and while creating special programs or special events, we felt that, you cannot have only for females, or like we had mixed messages from students, from staff, from faculty, that you cannot hold just for female or for Latino community, otherwise others will feel left out. But if it's a diversity related program, like I'm just trying to understand what is the best way. You are saying, for example, tie event, yes, it was probably open, it was not advertised to be a male event, right? So should we not advertise as a woman related event or Latino community related event? Or should we say that it is an event for those, but it's open for all? Should we say
yes? That? So my personal, what you just said, absolutely. Because you want it when you're doing a program or a presentation, you're going to invite everyone to be inclusive, but you also want to be able to advertise it from whatever the content is as well. So what is the content that you want to share? Now, I, as a person who identifies as a male student, I may look at the invitation and say, well, the content really doesn't apply to me. I think you're still going to have that regardless of whatever program you offer. If it's focused on one group, there's always going to be one or two other groups that don't feel included. But I think it's the invitation, it's the content of the material that you're sharing and allowing students to make the decision for themselves. Because then that group or one or two groups that did not feel included may come to you and say, hey, have you ever thought about hosting this, because this would work for both of our groups? So again, it goes back to that active component. The other thing that I'm going to say, and whether this sounds very unpopular or not, 9 out of 10 times, if you listen to every single student and you're actively listening, you might come up with 100 different things. And so around that, you have to build the themes of what you're hearing. What is the theme of what we just heard? We heard that these 10 offices do nothing from an inclusive perspective for students. That's a theme. We heard that this group of students, they want us to talk about graduate school and research, which we're not doing. So you want to pack that through themes, because then that might cover the entirety of all of your students. And again, if there is a one-off, and what I mean by the one-off is the one student that asks for something that you're saying, do you realize that that's going to cost the university $300,000 to do? It may not be realistic. And that's why I talked about realistic with practical and financial. But I would do that because, again, pack it around themes, because I think you're going to cover more groups, and still opening it to everyone and allowing students to make that decision if they want to enter that space or not.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know there's a long question on the other side, so I've got to read it to understand it.
I'm gonna turn it over to Jim just for a final thought, and then we're actually gonna move into our awards program, and we will look to have a conversation with Junior so he can address some of these questions, and we'll send some follow-up to you as well. So thank you so much, Junior, and I'll turn it over to Jim for 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much, Junior, for being here and sharing your thoughts and wisdom with us. And I think the overarching answer to a lot of the questions that are being asked is that students go to who they know and who they trust for career advice. And that was really the cornerstone of the Career Everywhere and Career Champions program. Again, because Junior touched on this a couple of times, that we don't have the resources, or quite honestly, the knowledge to engage with every single student on our campus in their authentic voice. But through the voices of the 400 and hopefully 500, 600 career champions, we can give you the tools so that you can interpret that to the language and the ethos and the lived experience of the students that you engage with. And that's the beauty of it. So I wanted to thank Junior. I know there were other questions. We will get those to Junior and have him respond to those in writing and get those answers out to you. But again, thank you so much, Junior, for your time and your talent today. Very much appreciated.